right, infernal blessings and all that good shit. No, stop. All that good shit. All right, let me get myself cranking here. All right, we're back with another video. Let me just run through a couple quick announcements real fast. Yearly forecast readings. As I say, they are building fast. Still running them for the rest of this month of January, all February to the very, very first few days in March is when they stop. You can book your yearly forecast reading now. Reach out to me. Please include in your email your time zone you're in, and please include your full weekly availability, not just 1 or 2 days you're available. And that goes the same for any other type of reading I offer: Clepothic Demonic readings, Santa Muerte readings, Egyptian Oracle readings, shadow work readings, which, as I said, is always a great place or a great reading to do, because it kind of helps you see what you got going on, and then it points you in the correct direction as far as ritual work. And the type of work you need to be doing should always be centered around what you got going on currently around you and in your life. Deity readings to see what gods, goddesses, and demons walk with you. Any of the aforementioned, shoot me an email, khnum19@gmail.com. And again, please include your full weekly availability and the time zone there, and we'll go from there. All right. Having said that, also, don't forget to check out the social media pages. Primordial Chaos 9 on Instagram, Primordial Chaos 2 words on Facebook. Also, Primordial Chaos 3 on TikTok. If you want to sign up for classes, go to the official Primordial Chaos Patreon page, patreon.com/Baniti, Baniti. Tier 3 is the tier you want to join. That's going to give you access to the 3 private classes I do every month on Patreon, in addition to the group ritual that we do together at the end of the month. And keep in mind, when you join the Patreon page, you don't just get access from the day you join. Moving forward, you get access to everything in the archives going almost 5 years back. If you want to check out all the ongoing classes, go to the page, patreon.com/Baniti, and go to the collection section. You'll see the classes all labeled and archived, and you'll be able to see every class that is there, plus the 2 new classes we just added, which I'm going to talk a little bit more about on the subject matter. All right. Also, don't forget to check out the Primordial Chaos podcast, available on Spotify and all major podcast platforms. The direct link to the podcast, my email address, to the social media pages, and to the Patreon page to sign up for classes. All of that information is in the description box of this video. All right, you see the title, Necronomicon and Opening the Gates to the Underworld. We've added a new class. I'll speak real briefly for a minute or two about the Patreon page. We have added this Necronomicon class now that just started. We've only done 1 class, which began this month a couple of weeks ago. We also added an Egyptian Hermetic Alchemy class, which these first two classes, great feedback on them. People got a lot out of them. Not that they don't the others, but we really went in, and we've only done 1 class for each one, and we've really covered a lot of ground and topic and kind of insight, even moving forward, of what we're getting ready to do with it. But because I wanted to do this short, quick video on the Necronomicon, it is a new class, so some of the stuff I'm talking about here, we're going through the Necronomicon in its entirety, its origin, its history. We're going back to H.P. Lovecraft. We take it from that point up to James Wasserman, who I actually knew. James Wasserman, he was actually he presided over our OTO lodge here in Fort Lauderdale. If you know the history of James Wasserman, Wasserman started the first OTO lodge in New York City, in Manhattan. Those who are familiar with him. He's written some really good books on OTO, the Gnostic Mass. One of my favorite books he's written is The Assassins, the Militia of Heaven. He was very, very thorough on his information and research, and as a high priest in the order of the Templi Orientis, he definitely was connected on that level. So we're going into the whole history of that. We're getting in depth into kind of what it's evolved into. We're getting into also the individual that's strongly connected to that, called Simon, who has written some post books after that, working with the Necronomicon, the dead names, and opening those different gates to the underworld. Now, just a little brief, again, short tutorial on it. I know there's many people out there who are very familiar with the Necronomicon and probably have a lot of experience working with it, but I also know there's a lot of newer people out there that might have heard of it or don't even really know anything about it. Those that do know, and let me put it out there, it is intense work. There is the origin behind it of what some would call working with entities or extraterrestrial beings. You're gonna find different feedback on it. Some have described, positive feedback, getting good results. Some have also described some terrifying things and some very, and I'll talk about that in a minute, some very negative, impactful things and not so positive experiences. And some have been, not going to sugarcoat it, just straight scared shitless and put it down and stop working with it. Okay? You are working with a group of beings called the Anunnaki. You're working with a lot of the Sumerian deities in the Necronomicon. There's a lot of information out there over the years. Obviously, it's still a popular topic. You have many people who constantly do videos and lectures and classes on the Anunnaki. Some of it's good, some of it's bullshit, some of it's kind of in between. But I would encourage some works by Zachariah Stitchin. You can look at some of the lectures on the Anunnaki of Dr. Delbert Blair. Jeremy Black, some of his work on the Anunnaki to get you familiar with the deities. So my suggestion would be if you're not, get yourself familiar with that whole Sumerian pantheon and the different archetypes and deities that are affiliated with it. Because in the Necronomicon, you're working with deities like Marduk, Tiamat, Damkina, Damuzi, Ishtar, Enki, Enlil, Tammuz. You're working with this entire pantheon. So my first step to people would be get yourself educated and knowledgeable about ancient Sumeria, the deities, and some of the ancient Sumerian text. Because some of the works in the Necronomicon, especially because they're all gates, you're opening gates, it's gate work. You'll see some of those stories are in a lot of those ancient Sumerian texts. Now, there's difference of opinion who these beings are. There's different, many of them to believe who the Bible refers to as angels, or the Elohim, or the Allahumma in the Quran. Some of them say that these are the beings that are on something called Nibiru. Some call it Rylos 7, or the Crystal City mentioned in Revelations, headed back to our planet. And some believe that we are, and I'm just throwing stuff out there. I'm not telling you what to believe. I'm telling you to go do your research. And some believe that we are a byproduct of a genetic creation of these beings, right? When you're dealing with that whole concept of extraterrestrials and the origin of different life forms outside of our planet and outside of our Milky Way galaxy, right? We'd have to be foolish to think, number one, that we are the only intelligent life force here. That would be just complete stupidity and foolishness. Okay, so wanna just put that to rest. If anybody thinks that, you got to be foolishness. Now, I'm careful how I talk about extraterrestrials, other life forms, because as I've said before, I don't think people understand the deities, the spirits, gods, goddesses, and demons that we work with on this path. They are not just of human origin. So in essence, you've been working with that and dealing with that if you're on this path. Just depends on your perspective and how you look at it. Okay? But I also like to always keep intact the reality and the understanding that we don't want to ever take an inferior approach to these beings. We have the same knowledge, capability, and spiritual essence and powers of these beings. We've just lost it through this system of being mentally indoctrinated and enslaved, and other forms of, whether it's genetic manipulation, whether it's other systems that they put on us. Obviously things, evolution and things over the years have changed. We're not eating the same foods. We're probably not drinking the same waters, and we don't have a good understanding of how genetics and mixing works, which gets into a whole nother topic. I don't want to turn it into that. But in reference to these Anunnaki that you are working with in the Necronomicon, they're very volatile beings. Now, a lot of you are familiar with Tiamat as a whole. And as you know, Tiamat is a very powerful demoness or demigod, or whatever term they want to use to work with, right? Marduk is a very powerful entity or archetype to work with. So you are opening the gates to these beings. Now, where it comes with some people who describe a lot of really bad shit happening to them, because remember, when you're opening gates, you're also opening up portals to your conscious and your psyche. And again, I can't reiterate, I don't know how many times I need to reiterate the importance of being in a sound mind and a sound body. So what tends to happen, sometimes people are opening themselves up to these energies, these spiritual beings and forces, and psychologically they're not prepared for them. Okay? Because some of the things that are described, and I can speak on this from experience, and so can probably others, you're dealing with entities that have, they're dealing with higher spiritual faculties like psychometry, telepathy, which is key. Anything that falls into the abilities of psychic abilities and phenomenon, people have described what some might call abductions, for lack of a better word. In working with the Necronomicon, people have described about feeling the presence of entities around them in their mind and hearing voice. Just varying degrees. Now, I can only share briefly some of my personal experience working with it, because one, I was fortunate a few years back, before I was technically on what someone would call the left-hand path in the occult, when I go back to the early 90s, early to mid 90s, I was working, or where I was at that time in my spiritual work and studies. One of the things I was working with heavy at that time was working with the Sumerian tablets and the Anunnaki. Now, I realized later, I didn't know. I realize now that I was technically doing some Necronomicon work then without even knowing anything about the Necronomicon. So I got kind of familiar with it back in the early to mid 90s with the Anunnakis, with like some of the ancient texts like the Gilgamesh epics, the Atrahasis, getting familiar with some of the cuneiform that they were written in, understanding the stories of the different Sumerian deities, which I highly suggest you do if you're thinking about taking on Necronomicon work. If you're in the Patreon class, I've already reiterated this to people in the class. I highly get yourself knowledgeable and educated with that information, because it's going to help you. Okay? So I think what happens to those that, quote unquote, describe a very negative experience with it, because one thing everybody should see by now, especially if you've been on this path for a little bit, one thing you should see by now is, you notice working with a lot of these archetypes, they all have a different vibrational energy. They have a certain feel to them, in simplistic terms, and you can sense it, you can feel it all throughout your being. You kind of know, like I kind of know when I'm working with the energy, and I'm working because it has a certain vibration to it. And it's easy for me to recognize and tap in, because you become so acclimated with that energy. This has, like many other paths, has its very own unique and distinct energy when you're working with it. So I wouldn't suggest anybody to take it lightly. Then the thing that always comes up with a lot of these grimoires and spiritual system is the Necronomicon fiction, or is it real? And when you understand the history and the origin of it, going back to H.P. Lovecraft, it's like anything else. It's as real as it is as you tap into it. Okay? A lot of these things that are portrayed as mythology, look, a lot of the ancient Egyptian texts is portrayed as mythology. And where the challenge comes in, whether it's ancient Sumeria, ancient Egypt, right, there's that mix, and that sometimes where's the fine line between mythology, fact or fiction, or reality? And you're looking at a combination of both. That's the reality. But I've always said something going back years ago. How you kind of blend that all in. You take the mythological or the mythology portion of it and you ritualize it. I've always said this, okay? And I've always made this crystal clear. That's how you do it, okay? You ritualize the mythology. So just like ancient Egypt, same thing with ancient Sumeria, you're seeing a combination of both. And what's going to help you get more clarity on that is the more you educate yourself to it. And then when you go into doing the gate work, it's going to give you a lot more clarity. As you know, my methodology of teaching, I don't like to just throw people in the mix. Because I know for the last couple of years, it's come up a few times. People have always requested, what about doing a Necronomicon class? And it's not that I don't hear you. I just feel it has to be a certain level of information and experience out that you have in order to do that. The same thing with the clip hop. And as you guys know, that was a class that I started last year, and it took a few years to get to it, but there was a reason for that. Because I want people to be prepared and have other aspects down packed first before jumping into sometimes intense work like the clip hop or like the Necronomicon, because I know the severity of it. I mean, all of this work falls into that category to some degree. But the Necronomicon, there's some that stand out a little more than others, and this is one of them. Okay, so there's reason why we just started now. Well, for a couple of reasons. One, because people have requested it, and two, obviously now is the right time because you guys have enough of stuff on the Patreon that has really prepared you. And that's just my methodology of teaching. I got to look at things as a whole. I know there's people out there that just don't even have no regard. They'll just throw you into something intense or hardcore. And I don't see the point of doing that, because in my opinion, that does more damage than it does good. Okay? So we have started the Necronomicon class. So if you are interested, and again, if you join now or soon, definitely check out that first class. It was a great start. And the Necronomicon is going to open the door to a lot of other topics and discussions, just like the Egyptian Hermetic Alchemy class has done. But definitely want to get in, check that out. But if you're really interested, and you have been interested in working with the ancient Sumerian deities, you've read the Necronomicon, maybe you've never done none of the work. There's other material in there we'll be tapping into, working with the dead names, which is a whole nother aspect of the Necronomicon. We're going to be tapping into all of those different things that's connected to it. I mean, me personally, I'm excited about it because, one, I'm fortunate enough to have some experience with it to a certain degree. I'm very familiar, especially with the energy of Marduk, Tammuz, Tiamat, Ishtar. Very familiar with that, and it's just, again, now is the time. You know, this is the time for us to tap in. If you don't have a copy of the Necronomicon, I mean, at least get it, have it in your library. You should read it, you should understand it, because it is one of those, if you want to refer to it as a grimoire, that is very popular and wide known. I would also encourage, let me throw this in there too, I know many of you are familiar with H.P. Lovecraft's work. I would highly encourage you guys to purchase some of his work, especially The Call to Cthulhu, as I told you, which was the inspiration behind the Aquaman movies. And speaking of Aquaman, I know the second one came out, I think it was late last year. I'm sorry, was it late 23 going into 24 or whatever? I just finally got around to watching it, believe it or not. And man, I'm thinking about doing a whole video on that. Watching the second one, they were dropping a lot of jewels in there, right? She had the 2 Warren brothers. I mean, I'll get into it. I think I'm going to do a separate quick video on that. But H.P. Lovecraft's work was the inspiration behind the last 2 Aqua movies that came out, Aquaman movies, because they connected the whole Aquaman thing to Leviathan and to the sacred kingdom of Atlantis, which is some good stuff in there when you really go back and look at it. So there's a connection. A lot of this stuff, you know, is connected. And the more you dig and probe, and the more you know, gather information on it, you start to see that. But I would encourage people, if those who are not familiar with H.P. Lovecraft and some of his work, I know a lot of you are. You know, H.P. Lovecraft was what, quote unquote, a fiction writer that had a very active, subjective mindset, and a lot of the stuff he wrote down were, some refer to him, I don't know if you could put him in that category, a horror fiction writer, but he's been really grafted and connected over the years as connected strongly to the left-hand path in the occult, because a lot of left-hand path occult practitioners have gravitated towards its writings and have incorporated it in their work. And remember, that can be done with any grimoire, any archetype system, not just deities. We do it again with the Sith philosophy, right? We've taken the Sith philosophy and used the whole the Grand Book of Sith, the Sith code, and we've turned it into a whole spiritual practice, which that can be done with anything. And I use the Sith as an example. No different when you take some of the works or writings of H.P. Lovecraft. No different when you take the whole concept of the Necronomicon in ancient Sumeria. No different when you take the whole concept and aspect of ancient Egypt. It's all connected and can all be utilized using that same methodology. All right. So I would encourage you guys, one, as I wrap this short tutorial up, I would encourage you guys, one, get you a copy of the Necronomicon. Go study some of those resources that I mentioned. Could even, all you gotta do is Google on YouTube videos about the Anunnaki in ancient Sumeria. A bunch of shit will come up. And again, cipher through it. Some's bullshit, some's legit. But that would be my first step. Educate yourself to the best of your ability, along with the addition of getting a copy of that Necronomicon, reading it before you do anything, obviously, would be my recommendation. All right. So, if you're interested in getting in on the Patreon page, obviously for the Necronomicon class in relationship to this video, but I would encourage you guys, again, go to the Patreon page and check out all the ongoing classes that I have going on right now. It's a lot. And we're adding new classes all the time. There's enough on there to keep you busy for a very long period of time. Okay? A very long period of time. But again, remember, when you sign up, if you join from tier 3 on up, you get access to everything in the archives and everything moving forward. And it's a lot of material. Okay? So check that out when you get some time. Go to the Patreon page. If you want to get into the Necronomicon class, do that now. We will be doing class 2 in the month of February. We'll also be doing class 2 of the Egyptian Hermetic Alchemy class in February as well. As we get those classes out and cranking, try to get a couple installments in those classes. We just had, as of the recording of this video yesterday, we just had a phenomenal shadow work class number 23 yesterday. So I would encourage you guys to definitely sign up, get in the groove if that's what you feel like doing, and you really want to get in on the Necronomicon class or any of the other classes. All right. Other than that, just a little brief tutorial on the Necronomicon and kind of what we're doing on the Patreon page. Other than that, if you need to reach out to me, my contact email address, along with all the links to the social media pages, the podcast, the direct link to the Primordial Cast Patreon page to sign up for the classes. All of that information is in the description box of this video that you're watching right now, all right? Other than that, that's it for me. Infernal blessings.